If you only had 1 minute left to live, what would you do? That question has haunted me for as long as I can remember. It's a simple question, one that most people would brush off as an odd philosophical thought, something to ponder during idle moments. But for me, the question held a weight I couldn't shake off. Maybe it's because I'm in my 70s now. Maybe it's because I've lived long enough to know that time is fleeting. Whatever the reason, that question had a way of lingering in the back of my mind. I used to think I had all the time in the world, just like everyone else. My life was full of routines and responsibilities, things to do, people to see, places to go. But when you reach my age, you start to realize that time doesn't wait for anyone. You start to think about the things you've left undone, the things you wish you had done differently. And the fear creeps in. What if my time runs out before I'm ready? I never believed in an afterlife. I never saw the need for it. For me, death was simply the end, nothing more, nothing less. It was a comforting belief, in a way, because it meant I wouldn't have to worry about what happened after I was gone. But that belief was shattered one fateful day when I found myself lying on an operating table with no pulse, no heartbeat, and no breath. It was an ordinary procedure, or so I thought. A routine surgery, something the doctors said was necessary to help with my health problems. But as I lay there, drifting in and out of consciousness, something strange began to happen. I could feel my heart slow, then stop altogether. My breathing stopped. I couldn't move or speak, and before I knew it, the world around me went dark. I wasn't afraid, though. At least, I didn't feel fear the way I thought I would. It was as if time itself had come to a standstill. I wasn't sure if I was dreaming or if I was dead. The lines between the two began to blur, and I had no sense of where I was or what was happening. Then, as if someone flipped a switch, I became aware of something beyond my body. I wasn't in the operating room anymore. I wasn't on the table. I could no longer feel the cold metal against my skin, nor the sterile scent of the hospital air. Instead, I found myself floating, yes, floating, above the scene. I could see my own body lying motionless on the table, surrounded by doctors and nurses, their faces full of concern, but I couldn't hear anything. It was as if the world had muffled itself, and all that was left was a strange, eerie silence. I watched them work, their hands moving quickly, their voices frantic. I couldn't understand what they were saying, but I knew one thing for sure, they thought I was gone. They thought I was dead. And for a brief moment, I believed them. But then, something extraordinary happened. I began to feel a pull, a force that gently, but firmly, tugged me upward. It was subtle at first, just a faint sensation, like a soft breeze lifting me off the ground. But as I let go of the fear and confusion that had gripped me, the pull grew stronger. I felt lighter, freer, as if I was being guided somewhere. Somewhere beyond this world. I don't know how to describe it, but it felt like I was leaving my physical body behind. There was no pain, no struggle, just an overwhelming sense of peace. As I rose higher and higher, I saw the lights of the operating room grow smaller and smaller, until they were nothing more than distant, twinkling dots. And then, I saw it. A light. Bright, warm, and inviting. It wasn't harsh or blinding, but soft, like the glow of a sunset. I was drawn to it, like a moth to a flame, and I couldn't resist. I felt as if this light held all the answers I had been searching for my entire life. Answers about death, about existence, about everything that had ever confused me. I wasn't scared. In fact, I felt a profound sense of calm, like I was exactly where I was meant to be. It was as though the universe had opened its arms to me, welcoming me into something bigger than myself. I don't know how long I floated toward that light. Time didn't seem to exist in the way it did before. All I knew was that I was moving, drawn irresistibly toward something beyond understanding. As I approached the light, I began to notice shapes, figures, like shadows, standing just beyond its glow. They weren't fully formed, but I could feel their presence. There was something familiar about them, though I couldn't place it. I wasn't afraid. I wasn't even curious, really. I just felt peace. And then, in the midst of this tranquil experience, a voice spoke to me. Not out loud, but inside my mind. It was calm, soothing, and unmistakably kind. It wasn't a voice I recognized, but it felt familiar. You can stay, if you wish. Or you can return. The choice is yours. The words echoed in my mind, reverberating with a sense of truth that I could not deny. For the first time in my life, I understood what it meant to be given a choice, to be given a second chance. The idea of staying, of remaining in that place of peace and light, was tempting. After all, I had lived a full life. What more was there to experience? But the voice, the presence around me, made it clear that this was not the end for me, not yet. I wanted to stay, but I knew deep down that there was still more for me to do. I wasn't finished. With a deep, almost sorrowful sigh, I made my choice. I will return, I said, not knowing where the words came from but knowing they were the truth. And just as quickly as it had all begun, I felt myself pulled away from the light, back toward my body. The warmth faded, and the calmness was replaced with the harsh reality of life, the cold metal of the operating table, the frantic doctors and nurses. I was coming back. And though I didn't fully understand why, I knew I wasn't the same man who had left that table just moments before. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The moment I made the choice to return, I felt a sudden jolt. It wasn't a physical jolt, not one you would feel with your body. It was more like a shift, like a deep, magnetic force pulling at the very core of my being, dragging me back to the place I had just left behind. But even as I felt myself being tugged, part of me hesitated. The peace, the serenity I had felt in that light. Was it something I could leave behind so easily? Could I really go back to the world I had just been pulled from? And yet, as the pull intensified, I knew that I had no choice. The voice, the presence I had felt, had made it clear, it wasn't my time yet. There was something left for me to do, something that I hadn't finished. I didn't know what it was, but I felt a profound sense of duty, as if my soul had been gently guided in the right direction. The light slowly began to fade from my vision, and the figures that had been standing in the distance started to dissolve. The warmth and comfort I had known began to slip away, replaced by something colder, more distant. I wanted to turn back, to reach out and stay where I was, but it was no use. The pull was irresistible. And then, like a sudden gust of wind, I found myself back. The first thing I noticed was the weight. The weight of my body, of this body, was so foreign to me. It felt heavy, as if I were trapped inside it, struggling to move. I was aware of every ache, every strain, and yet, at the same time, I felt distant from it, like it wasn't truly mine anymore. I was no longer floating, no longer light and free. I was tethered to something solid, something tangible. But it wasn't just the physical weight I noticed. It was the shock of returning to a place that felt like a world I no longer recognized. I had just been on the brink of something extraordinary, something that transcended life and death, and now, I was back in a world of hospitals and cold rooms, surrounded by sterile machines and beeping monitors. The beeping, that's what I heard first. The rhythmic sound of the heart monitor. It was a constant reminder that I was, in fact, alive, though not in the way I had been before. My body was still there, still breathing, but I didn't feel like me anymore. And then I became aware of the people around me, the doctors, the nurses. They were moving swiftly, talking in urgent voices. But it felt so distant, so far away. I could hear them, but I couldn't connect with them. They didn't understand. How could they? I had just been somewhere they couldn't even imagine. I looked down at my hands, and for a moment, I didn't recognize them. They looked like someone else's hands, wrinkled, worn, fragile. But I knew they were mine. I could feel the pulse in my fingertips, the slight tremor of my fingers as I tried to move them. Is he? He's still with us, but it's touch and go. We'll need to monitor him closely. The voices around me were muffled, like I was underwater, but I understood what they were saying. They thought I was in a coma. They thought I had just been unconscious for a long period of time. But in my mind, I knew the truth. I had crossed the threshold. I had seen the other side. I had been on the verge of something beyond this world, and now I was back. It felt unnatural. It felt wrong. The first sensation that hit me was the pain. My chest burned, my body felt stiff, and there was an aching soreness deep in my bones. But it was more than just physical pain. It was the emotional weight of what I had experienced, the sense of loss, of longing for the peace I had left behind. I tried to move, to speak, to let them know that I wasn't the same man who had gone under the knife. But my voice was weak, my words a struggle. I wanted to scream out, to tell them what had happened, but all I could manage was a faint whisper. They said I was dead, I croaked, my voice barely audible. One of the nurses, a young woman with kind eyes, leaned in close, concern written across her face. It's okay, Mr. Miller. You're going to be just fine. We've got you. But I knew I wasn't fine. The minutes stretched into hours, and as I lay there in the sterile hospital room, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was somehow different. I had just been to the edge of existence, where the rules of time and space didn't apply. I had seen the light, felt its warmth, and been told that I could stay. But I had chosen to return. Was I supposed to be here? Was I supposed to go back to this life? Or had I made a mistake? As the doctors and nurses continued to work around me, my mind was racing. I felt disconnected. Like I had come back from somewhere that none of them could ever understand. They didn't know what I had seen, what I had felt. They couldn't see the light that had surrounded me, the warmth of it, the love. They couldn't hear the voice that had told me that I could stay, or that I had a choice. But there was something else, too. A deep, unsettling sense of purpose. I didn't know what it was yet, but I felt it growing inside me, tugging at me, as if there was something I had to do, something I needed to figure out before I could truly rest. The doctors were talking again, discussing my condition, and it was then that I realized something even more unsettling. I had come back from the dead. I had crossed over, seen the other side, and now I was alive again. But was I really living? I looked around the room, my eyes searching for something familiar. My wife, Eleanor, had to be somewhere. She'd been by my side through all the years, through the good times and the bad. But when I tried to focus, all I could see was an empty chair, untouched. I closed my eyes, and for a moment, I thought about the light again. I thought about the warmth, the peace, the love. But then, something deep inside me stirred. There was something more waiting for me. Something I needed to do. And no matter how much I longed to return to the peace I had felt, I knew that I wasn't done yet. Not yet. I had to go back, but I had no idea how. As the hours passed, I found myself lying there in that sterile hospital bed, my mind buzzing with thoughts that felt too grand, too overwhelming for my body to contain. The physical pain was still sharp, especially in my chest, where they had operated on me, but it was the emotional turmoil that consumed me the most. I had just come back from the other side, the place I had been so certain didn't exist. And now, I had to find my way back into this world, a world that felt so distant, so foreign to me now. The world around me moved at its usual pace, and yet, it felt completely out of sync with me. The nurses came and went, checking the IVs, taking my vitals, all of it routine. But nothing about me was routine. Nothing about me was the same. I closed my eyes and tried to concentrate. I remembered the light. The intense, beautiful light that had surrounded me, filling me with warmth and peace beyond anything I had ever known. I remembered the figures standing at the edges of the light. They were not fully formed, but their presence was undeniable. I didn't know who they were, but I felt they were somehow familiar. They made me feel safe, protected. And then, there had been the voice. You can stay, if you wish. Or you can return. The choice is yours. The voice had been calm, gentle, yet firm, and it echoed in my mind. I had made my choice, of course. I had chosen to return to my body, to this life, but why? What was it that made me want to come back? What was I meant to do? I wasn't sure I had any answers. All I knew was that there was something waiting for me, something I had to understand before I could truly rest. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that this feeling, this deep knowing, wasn't just some vague, fleeting thought. It was real. I had been shown something, told something, and I couldn't simply ignore it. There was a message. A message I had to share. I had to speak of it. But who would believe me? I couldn't shake the image of my wife, Eleanor, sitting in that chair, her face pale with worry. She had been with me for so many years, through thick and thin, but I had never spoken to her about anything like this before. How could I explain to her what I had experienced? How could I make her understand that I had touched something beyond our world, something that defied all logic and reason? But before I could even gather my thoughts enough to call for her, a nurse entered the room with a clipboard, her face neutral as she checked my vitals again. She smiled at me when she saw my eyes open. "How are we feeling today, Mr. Miller?" she asked gently. The question seemed almost comical in that moment, like I was supposed to give a simple answer, like everything was normal. But how could I say I was fine? How could I say I was the same man who had gone under the knife a few hours ago, when in reality, I had just crossed into the afterlife and come back? I opened my mouth to speak, but my voice was weak. It felt like it took all the energy I had just to get the words out. I've been somewhere," I whispered, my voice cracking. "I've seen something. Something I can't explain." The nurse blinked and gave me a soft, almost pitying look. "It's okay, Mr. Miller. You've been through a lot. You're probably just a little disoriented from the anesthesia. Why don't you rest for a bit? You're going to be just fine." I nodded, but I didn't believe her. How could I? What I had experienced wasn't some hallucination. It wasn't a side effect of the anesthesia. It was real. I didn't need anyone to tell me what I had felt. I knew it deep down in my bones. As the nurse left the room, I allowed my mind to drift back to what I had seen, the light, the figures, and the voice. The voice that had asked me if I wanted to stay or return. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that what I had experienced wasn't just about me. It wasn't about my life or my death. It was a message, a gift meant to be shared. A message of hope, of love, and of faith. I had always thought of myself as a man of logic. I didn't believe in God, or in any kind of higher power. I had spent my life working hard, providing for my family, trying to make sense of the world around me. The idea of an afterlife seemed fanciful at best, and at worst, an absurd concept to be dismissed. But now, I couldn't deny what I had felt. I had seen it with my own eyes. I had heard the voice, and I had been told that there was something beyond this life. I wasn't sure what it all meant. I didn't know if I was ready to tell anyone what had happened. But I knew one thing for sure, I wasn't the same man who had gone into that operating room. I thought about my wife again, Eleanor. She would want answers. She had always been the practical one, the one who asked questions, the one who grounded me when my mind wandered. She deserved to know, even if I wasn't sure how to explain any of it. But as I lay there, feeling the weight of everything pressing down on me, I knew I had to find the courage to speak up. To tell her what I had experienced. I was no longer afraid of death, not in the way I had been before. Before, I had feared the unknown. I had feared what might lie beyond. But now, I understood. I had seen it for myself. Death wasn't the end. It was a transition. A doorway to something greater than we could ever comprehend. And if I had to go through that door again, I knew I would be ready. But for now, there was still something I had to do. Something I had to understand. Something I had to share with the world, because I couldn't keep it inside anymore. The message that I had been given wasn't for me alone. It was for everyone. The days that followed my return to the hospital were a blur of confusion and disbelief. My body had begun to heal, slowly but surely, but my mind was still reeling from what had happened. How could I just slip back into life as though nothing had changed? How could I pretend to be the same man when I knew, deep down, that I wasn't? I didn't have answers. I wasn't sure what had happened, or why I had been chosen to experience something so otherworldly. But I felt a deep, undeniable shift inside me, one that I couldn't ignore. Something had changed. I had been changed. The doctors and nurses continued to check on me, making sure my physical recovery was progressing as expected. They told me that I was a miracle, that I had pulled through against all odds. But none of them seemed to understand that I wasn't just recovering from a routine surgery. I had crossed a threshold, and I couldn't go back to the person I was before. Eleanor, my wife, was the one who noticed it first. I had tried to act normal, tried to mask the turmoil swirling inside me, but she knew something was different. She always did. One afternoon, after the nurse had left and the room had grown quiet, she took my hand in hers. Her grip was gentle, but there was an intensity in her gaze that made me feel exposed, as though she could see right through me. "You're not the same, John," she said softly, her voice trembling with the weight of her concern. "I can see it in your eyes. You've been through something. I can feel it." I stared at her, the woman I had shared my life with for so many years. Her presence had always been my anchor, my comfort. But now, I found myself at a loss for words. How could I explain the things I had seen, the things I had felt? How could I tell her that I had walked beyond the veil of life and death, and that I had returned with a message I couldn't fully understand myself? I took a deep breath, gathering the courage to speak, and when I did, my voice was barely a whisper. I was somewhere, Eleanor. Somewhere that I can't explain. It wasn't a dream, I swear. I know it sounds crazy, but I was in the light. Her eyes widened, and I could see the skepticism flicker in them, but she didn't interrupt me. Instead, she waited for me to continue. "I saw things, Eleanor. I don't know what to call them. Figures, shadows, but they felt familiar. I felt peace. I felt love. And I heard a voice." "A voice?" she repeated, her brow furrowed with concern. "John, what are you saying? Are you sure this wasn't just part of the anesthesia? Part of the shock?" I shook my head, feeling a surge of frustration rise within me. How could she not understand? How could anyone not understand? But I knew I had to be patient with her. She had always been the logical one, the one who sought answers in facts, not feelings. But this was something that couldn't be explained away. "I'm sure," I said firmly. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life." The voice told me that I could stay, or I could return. It was my choice. And I chose to come back. Eleanor's eyes softened, and she squeezed my hand, her expression filled with a mix of worry and tenderness. "John, I don't know what's going on, but I believe you. I can see it in your eyes. But you have to understand, I'm scared. I don't know what this means. What if you're not ready? What if it's too much for you?" I could hear the fear in her voice, and it made my chest tighten. I understood her fear. I didn't have the answers she was looking for, and that scared me, too. I had seen something that felt like the truth, but I didn't know how to explain it. I didn't know how to move forward. "I don't know what it means either," I admitted, my voice thick with emotion. But I know that I'm not the same man I was before. I've been given a message, Eleanor. I've been shown something, and I can't just go back to living as though nothing happened. I have to share this. I have to tell people. Because what I felt, what I saw, it wasn't just for me. It was for everyone. Her face softened as she looked at me, and for a moment, I could see the conflict within her. She wanted to believe me, but she was scared. She was scared for me, for us. And I didn't blame her. What I had experienced was something so beyond anything she, or anyone, could comprehend. I know this is hard, Eleanor, I said, my voice cracking. But I feel like I have a purpose now. Like I was sent back for a reason. I don't know what that reason is yet, but I have to figure it out. I have to. I can't ignore it. She nodded slowly, still unsure, but I could see the acceptance in her eyes. She had always been my rock, and even now, in the face of something so unfathomable, she was trying to understand. Trying to support me in whatever way she could. I'll be here with you, John, she said softly. Whatever this is, we'll figure it out together. I squeezed her hand, grateful for her unwavering love. But even as I looked at her, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more I needed to do, something that went beyond just explaining my experience. I had been given a glimpse into something vast, something eternal, and I couldn't keep it to myself. I didn't know what form this message would take, or how I would share it, but I knew one thing for certain: it was time to start telling my story. There was a purpose behind my return. A reason why I had been pulled back from the other side. And I had to find out what that purpose was, even if it meant facing the unknown, even if it meant stepping outside of everything I had known to be true. But I was ready. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of what came next. I had seen the light, and it was more than I could have ever imagined. And now, it was time to let the world know. Days turned into weeks as I slowly regained my strength. The physical wounds were healing, the pain was subsiding, but the real struggle was mental and emotional. The world I had known, the world of certainty and logic, no longer felt like my home. The experiences I had lived through during my near-death journey had altered my view of everything: myself, my purpose, the world around me. And though I knew I couldn't go back to how I had been before, I found myself wrestling with how to move forward. One afternoon, Eleanor and I sat on the porch of our small home, watching the sunset. The warm glow of the evening sun cast long shadows across the yard, and the scent of fresh grass and earth lingered in the air. It was a peaceful moment, but it didn't feel complete. There was something unspoken between us, something I had yet to fully voice. John, Eleanor's voice broke through my thoughts. What exactly do you think happened to you? I had been waiting for this question, though I had no idea how to answer it. How could I explain what I had seen, what I had felt, when it didn't make sense even to me? I don't know, I replied honestly. I wish I could explain it, but it's like trying to put the sun into a jar. Words don't do it justice. She nodded, her expression one of quiet understanding, though the lines on her face showed that she was still uncertain. She wanted to believe me, but I could see the skepticism lingering in her eyes. She was scared for me, for us. This wasn't the man she had known, the rational, grounded man who believed in the certainty of what could be seen and measured. But that man no longer existed. I had crossed over. I had been shown something that words couldn't fully capture. The experience had changed me at a fundamental level. Do you remember the light? I asked, turning toward her. She looked at me, her eyes soft yet probing, as if she were afraid I might be lost in the haze of trauma. I remember you talking about it, she said gently. But I want to know, John, what did it feel like? What was it like when you were there? On the other side? I inhaled deeply, trying to find the right words that would do justice to the magnitude of what I had experienced. I closed my eyes for a moment, trying to recall the details with the clarity I had felt when I was in that state, beyond the boundaries of time and space. It was indescribable, I began, my voice thick with emotion. The light wasn't just something you saw, it was something you felt. It surrounded me, it enveloped me. And it wasn't just a warmth like the sun or a cozy fire. It was a kind of love. A love so pure, so unconditional, that it made everything else feel insignificant. Eleanor's eyes softened as I spoke, but I could tell that she was still trying to wrap her mind around my words. How could she understand what I meant when there was no way to explain the depth of the experience? I felt connected, Eleanor, I continued, my words coming out in a rush now, as if the floodgates had opened. To everything. To the earth, to the sky, to the stars. It was like all of life, all of the universe, was part of me, and I was part of it. It wasn't just about me anymore. It was about everyone. I was one with it all. Eleanor was quiet for a long time, processing what I had said. She sat beside me, her hand resting on mine, her gaze distant as if trying to make sense of my experience. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. That sounds beautiful, John. But you're saying you're not afraid of death anymore, right? You're not afraid of leaving? I turned to face her, meeting her gaze with all the certainty I could muster. No, Eleanor. I'm not afraid of it. I've seen it. I've been there. It's not the end. It's just a new beginning. We don't have to be afraid of what's on the other side, because it's full of love, peace, and light. There's nothing to fear. She squeezed my hand, and I could feel the weight of her fear and love all at once. She wasn't afraid of me going, it was more the idea of what that meant. She didn't want to lose me, and I understood that. But somehow, deep down, I knew that I had been given a glimpse of something far bigger than the life we lived now. You really believe that, don't you? She asked softly, her voice tinged with awe and uncertainty. I do, I replied, my voice steady. I'm not the same person anymore, Eleanor. I've been given something that I can't just keep inside. I have to share it. I have to let people know that they're not alone, that death isn't something to fear. It's part of something much bigger. She nodded, her expression conflicted but softening. She had always been the practical one, the one who needed solid proof. But I could tell she was slowly coming to terms with the fact that what I had experienced couldn't be measured in the way she was accustomed to. This wasn't about facts and figures, it was about faith, about belief in something greater than ourselves. I'll support you, John, she said, her voice full of love. I don't fully understand it, but if this is what you need to do, I'll be by your side. I smiled at her, feeling a rush of gratitude. I had been afraid of how she might react, afraid that she would dismiss me as crazy or unhinged. But instead, she was trying to understand. She was accepting that I had been through something profound, and she was willing to support me in whatever came next. I think, I said, looking out at the horizon where the sun was setting in vibrant oranges and reds, that I'm supposed to tell people. There's a message, Eleanor. One I was meant to bring back. I'm not sure how, but I know that I have to. It's not just about me anymore. I feel like I'm supposed to help others understand that there's more to life, more to existence, than just what we see. I paused for a moment, the weight of what I was saying sinking in. It was a lot. But I knew it was true. I had been given a gift, a glimpse of the eternal, and now I had to share it. Eleanor nodded, taking in everything I was saying. Whatever this message is, John, you have my support. But you need to be careful. People may not understand. They might think you're crazy. I finished for her with a small, understanding smile. She returned the smile, a faint trace of humor in her eyes. Something like that. I know, I said, squeezing her hand. But I can't ignore it. I have to speak out, to tell people that there's no need to fear death. There's something so much greater waiting for us, Eleanor. And I want to share that with as many people as I can. It was a daunting task, but I knew it was my purpose now. I didn't know what shape it would take, but I felt an undeniable pull in my soul to begin sharing my story. I had been brought back for a reason, and it was time to start telling the world about the light, the peace, and the love I had experienced. I wasn't the same man I had been before. And I would never be afraid again. Not after seeing what I had seen. Not after feeling what I had felt. The world would hear my message, whether they were ready or not. And it was time for me to take the first step. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The days after my conversation with Eleanor felt like a blur of indecision and quiet anticipation. I was haunted by the experiences I had lived through during my near-death experience, and yet, I still wasn't sure how to move forward. I felt an overwhelming need to speak, to share what I had been shown, but the reality of doing so was far more daunting than I had imagined. How could I stand before others and tell them what I had seen? How could I convince them that I had touched something beyond this world? Eleanor was right, people would think I was crazy. They would question my sanity, my health, or chalk it up to hallucinations caused by anesthesia. I knew that. But what was I supposed to do with this new truth? Keep it locked away, only to fade as a fleeting memory of something I couldn't explain? No, that wasn't an option. The experience had been too real, too powerful to ignore. It was then that I realized, I had to take the first step. I couldn't keep waiting for the world to be ready. I had to be the one to step forward and speak. I had been given a message, and it was time to share it, even if it meant standing alone. One afternoon, I sat on the edge of the bed, staring out the window at the vast blue sky. The breeze rustled the leaves of the tree outside, and the sunlight filtered through the branches in soft, golden rays. There was a calmness to the world outside, but inside me, there was a storm. A storm of fear, doubt, and uncertainty. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that fear was just a barrier, one I had to break through. I had to begin. Eleanor came into the room, as if sensing my internal struggle. She stood in the doorway, her arms crossed, watching me quietly. "John," she said softly, "have you thought any more about what you want to do?" I nodded, my heart racing. "I have to talk to people, Eleanor. I have to share what I saw. What I felt. I can't keep it inside anymore." She stepped closer, sitting beside me on the bed. Her presence was steady, calming, but I could see the concern still etched on her face. She was afraid for me, afraid of how the world might react. But I knew I couldn't keep waiting for her to be ready, or for the world to make sense of it all. "I'm going to start small," I said, my voice low. "I'll talk to people I trust, people who might understand. I'll share my story, piece by piece, until it feels right. But I can't keep hiding from it. It's a part of me now. And I need to share it." Eleanor's expression softened, and she placed her hand on mine. "I believe in you, John. But please, be careful. This isn't going to be easy. People might not believe you. They might not understand. And it might hurt." I met her eyes, and for the first time since my experience, I felt a deep sense of peace wash over me. I wasn't afraid anymore. Not of the truth, not of the message I had been given. I wasn't sure how this would unfold, but I knew one thing: I couldn't live the rest of my life keeping it inside. "I know," I said quietly. "But if I don't try, if I don't share what I've learned, then what was the point of it all? I've been given this gift, this knowledge, and I have to do something with it. I have to try." Eleanor nodded slowly, her eyes filled with a mixture of pride and apprehension. She didn't fully understand, but she knew me well enough to see that this wasn't just a fleeting feeling, it was something deeper, something I couldn't ignore. "All right," she said, squeezing my hand. "I'll be here. Whatever you need." Over the next few days, I began to gather my thoughts. I knew I couldn't just go out and start shouting about my experience to anyone who would listen. It wasn't something that could be easily explained, and I didn't want to be seen as a lunatic. So, I started small, reaching out to people I knew, people I trusted. Friends, family members, and a few people who I felt might be open to hearing my story. The first conversation was the hardest. I reached out to my old friend, Mark, a man I had known for years. We had worked together for decades, and we had always had a deep respect for each other. But Mark was a man of logic, a scientist by training, someone who valued facts and reason above all else. I knew that telling him what had happened would be a challenge, but he was the first person I needed to talk to. I called him up, and we arranged to meet at a coffee shop in town. As I sat in the booth waiting for him, my heart began to race. I hadn't fully prepared for what I was about to say. How could I? How do you explain a near-death experience to someone who doesn't believe in anything beyond the physical world? Mark walked in, and I waved him over. His usual confident stride was there, but I could see the weariness in his eyes. I knew that his life had been stressful lately, and we hadn't seen each other in months. When he sat down across from me, he gave me a warm smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. "You look better," he said, looking me over. "I heard about the surgery. Glad to see you're still here, John." I chuckled nervously, my hands trembling slightly. "Yeah, it's a miracle, I guess." Mark raised an eyebrow. "A miracle? I thought you were a man of science, John. You always said there was an explanation for everything." I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. This was it. The moment I had been both dreading and yearning for. I had to say it. "Mark," I began, my voice steady but with a trace of emotion I couldn't hide. "I've seen something. I've been somewhere. I don't know how to explain it, but I need you to listen." He leaned back in his chair, eyeing me carefully, no doubt sensing that this wasn't just another one of my usual anecdotes. His expression shifted, no longer casual, but inquisitive. "I'm listening," he said slowly. "I died," I whispered. The words felt surreal as they left my lips. "I died on the operating table. And I saw the light. I felt it. It wasn't just a bright light, Mark, it was love. It was peace. And there was a voice, asking me if I wanted to stay or return. I came back, Mark. I came back with a message." Mark sat there, his face unreadable. The silence stretched between us like a thick fog. For a moment, I wasn't sure if I had just made a huge mistake. But then, he spoke. "Tell me everything." And so, I did. I told him about the light, the love, the figures I had seen. I told him about the voice, the choice, the overwhelming peace I had felt. I told him that I wasn't afraid anymore, that I knew there was something beyond this life, something far greater than I had ever imagined. And to my surprise, Mark didn't laugh. He didn't dismiss me or call me crazy. Instead, he listened. When I finished, he sat there for a long time, deep in thought. Finally, he looked up at me, his expression unreadable. "I don't know what to make of this, John," he said quietly. "But I'm not going to say it's impossible. I've seen things in my life that I can't explain. So, maybe you did see something. Maybe there is more to this life than we can understand. I don't know. But I'll take you seriously. You're my friend, and I trust you." A weight lifted off my shoulders as I heard those words. It wasn't much, but it was enough. Mark didn't fully understand, but he was open to the possibility. That was all I needed. It was a small step, but it was the first step. And for the first time since I returned from the other side, I felt like I was on the right path. The weeks that followed felt like a strange journey of discovery, not just about the world, but about myself. It wasn't easy, and there were moments when I felt unsure whether I was doing the right thing, whether I was truly meant to share what I had experienced. But after my conversation with Mark, something had shifted inside me. I realized that the only way to truly honor the experience was to continue speaking about it, to share the light, the peace, the love, and the message I had been entrusted with. It wasn't about convincing people to believe in the same things I had seen, it was about helping them understand that there was more to this life than what we could touch, taste, or measure. It was about giving them the possibility of hope, of understanding, and of peace. But sharing the message wasn't as simple as just telling someone what had happened to me. Every conversation felt like a delicate balance between vulnerability and conviction, between sharing something so deeply personal and trusting that the other person would listen without judgment. After talking with Mark, I found myself reaching out to others, family members, friends, people who had known me before the surgery. I started small, sharing bits and pieces of the experience with those I felt could handle it, those who wouldn't automatically dismiss me as crazy or delusional. It wasn't always easy. Some people simply didn't know how to respond. Some didn't want to believe. But I also met people who were open, who saw the sincerity in my eyes and the passion in my voice. One of those people was my sister, Carol. Carol and I hadn't been particularly close in the years before my surgery. We were family, of course, but life had pulled us in different directions. I had always been a little too wrapped up in work, and Carol had her own life, her own family. But after the surgery, things had shifted. I felt a pull to reconnect with her, to share this new truth that had reshaped my life. One afternoon, I invited her over for tea at our house. Eleanor was out running errands, and it seemed like the perfect opportunity. When Carol arrived, she brought with her the familiar warmth of family, and it was easy to slip into the comfortable rhythm of conversation. But I could tell something had changed in me. I wasn't the same person I had been before the surgery, and I knew I couldn't keep pretending I was. After a few minutes of small talk, I found the courage to bring up the topic that had been weighing on my heart. "Carol," I began, my voice slightly trembling, "there's something I need to tell you." She looked up from her teacup, her expression attentive but a little puzzled. "What's going on, John? You look serious." I took a deep breath, steadying myself. I don't know how to explain this, but after my surgery, I had an experience. A near-death experience. And I've been thinking about it a lot. I think I need to tell you about it. She raised her eyebrows, her curiosity piqued. A near-death experience? What do you mean? I swallowed, trying to gather my thoughts. I mean that, when I was on the operating table, I died. I felt my heart stop. And when I did, I left my body. I was in this incredible place, Carol. It was so peaceful, so full of love. And there was this light that wasn't just something you see, but something you feel, something you are. I was told that I could either stay or come back. And I came back. Carol's eyes widened as I spoke, but she didn't interrupt. She simply listened, her face showing signs of confusion, concern, but also genuine curiosity. When I finished speaking, she was quiet for a moment, absorbing what I had said. "You really believe this, don't you?" she asked softly, her voice trembling with a mix of disbelief and awe. "I do," I said, meeting her gaze. "I can't explain it in any other way. I've seen it, I've felt it, and I know that there is so much more beyond this life than we realize." She sat back in her chair, her hands resting in her lap as she processed my words. The silence between us was heavy, but not in a bad way. It was the silence of something new, something neither of us had fully understood but were willing to explore. "I'm not sure what to make of it," she finally said. "I've never heard anyone talk about something like this before. But I know you, John. And I know you're not the kind of person to make something up." "I'm not asking you to believe it," I replied softly. "I just wanted you to know. I wanted to share it with you because it's part of who I am now. And maybe it will help you understand that there's more to life, more than what we can see and touch." Carol took a long sip of her tea, and I could see her mind working behind her eyes. She wasn't ready to fully accept what I was saying, but she wasn't dismissing it either. She was willing to entertain the possibility, and that was more than I could have asked for. "You're right," she said, setting her teacup down. "I don't know what happens after we die, but I can see how important this experience was for you. And I think I'm glad you're sharing it with me. Even if I don't fully understand it yet." I smiled, a sense of relief flooding through me. I had taken a step, a small but significant one, and she hadn't rejected me. That was enough for now. Over the following weeks, I continued to share my story with more people. Some were open, some were skeptical, but each conversation felt like I was building a bridge between the life I had known and the new truth I was carrying. Each conversation was a step towards something bigger, something I couldn't yet fully comprehend, but something that felt so undeniably important. The most rewarding conversations were with those who had also experienced loss, those who had lost loved ones and were searching for answers. I spoke with one woman, Linda, who had lost her husband to cancer just a year before. When I shared my experience with her, she broke down in tears. "I've been so afraid," she confessed, wiping away her tears. "Afraid of what happens when we die. Afraid that I'll never see him again. But what you're saying, it gives me hope. Maybe there is something after this. Maybe he's not gone forever." Her words touched me deeply. This was why I had to share my story. It wasn't about proving anything to anyone, it was about offering comfort, about giving people the possibility of peace. It was about helping them understand that death was not an end, but a transition to something greater. Something full of love, peace, and light. It wasn't easy, and the road ahead was uncertain, but I was more certain than ever that I had been given a gift. A gift I had to share. And as I shared it, I began to heal. I began to feel more connected to the world around me, more certain of my place in it. I wasn't afraid anymore. Not of death, not of the unknown. I had seen the light, and I knew it was real. And that was enough. The more I shared my story, the more I began to understand how deep its impact could be. It wasn't just the people I spoke to face that felt the effect, it was like I was sending ripples out into the world, changing the atmosphere around me. Slowly but surely, the message I had brought back from the other side was finding its way into the hearts and minds of others. I wasn't sure how long this would last or where it would lead me, but I was no longer afraid. I had seen something that most people couldn't fathom, but now, I had the chance to show them that there was something more to this life. And that, to me, felt like a responsibility. One of the most unexpected outcomes of sharing my experience came from a former colleague of mine, Peter. Peter and I had worked together for many years, but we had lost touch after I retired. I had known him to be a devout atheist, someone who scoffed at anything that could be classified as spiritual or mystical. So when I reached out to him to share my story, I honestly didn't expect much. But his reaction was something I'll never forget. We met at a local diner, one of those places that had been a staple in our community for decades. The old checkered floor, the smell of fresh coffee brewing, and the quiet hum of conversations created an atmosphere of warmth and comfort. I was nervous, unsure of how Peter would respond to my words. He walked in, his familiar face now a little older, with a tiredness in his eyes that spoke of the years that had passed since we last spoke. When he sat down across from me, he gave me a tight smile. "John," he said, looking me up and down, "I didn't expect to see you here. I heard about the surgery. How are you feeling?" "I'm good, Peter," I replied, my voice steady despite the nerves. "Actually, there's something I need to talk to you about." He raised an eyebrow, waiting for me to continue. I could tell he was intrigued, but also a little skeptical. "Peter, I know you don't believe in any of this spiritual stuff," I started slowly, "but something happened to me during my surgery. Something I can't explain. I had a near-death experience." He leaned back in his chair, folding his arms across his chest, and I could see the familiar skepticism in his eyes. But he didn't interrupt. "I know this is hard to believe," I continued, "but I died on the table. I felt my heart stop, and I left my body. And when I did, I found myself in a place, well, I can't even describe it fully, but it was a place filled with light, peace, and love. It was more real than anything I've ever experienced in my life. Peter sat quietly for a moment, absorbing my words. I couldn't tell what he was thinking. His expression was unreadable, a familiar shield he often put up whenever something challenged his rational view of the world. Finally, he spoke. "John, you know me. I don't buy into this stuff. But you're not the kind of guy to make things up. You've never been one for exaggeration or fantasies." I nodded, relieved that he wasn't completely dismissing me. "I know, Peter. I'm not asking you to believe it. I'm not asking you to accept it as truth. I needed to tell you. This experience changed me. It's given me a new perspective on life. And I don't want to keep it to myself anymore. I want you to know that there's something after this life. I've felt it. I've seen it." He was silent for a long time, his eyes searching my face as though trying to find some hint of doubt. But I knew there was none. I had no doubt. I knew what I had seen, and I couldn't deny it, no matter how hard I tried. After a long pause, Peter spoke again. "I can't explain what you went through, John. I don't believe in any of it. But, if you believe it, if this experience gave you peace, then maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there's something more to this than I've thought." His words weren't a complete acceptance, but they were something. They were enough to make me feel that even in his skepticism, there was room for doubt to grow, room for understanding to evolve. He didn't reject my experience outright, and that was a small victory in itself. "I don't know if I'll ever fully accept it," Peter continued, "but I do know one thing: you've changed. And whatever happened to you, I hope it gives you the peace you're looking for." I smiled, feeling a warmth inside me that I hadn't felt in a long time. "It has, Peter. It really has." As I left the diner that day, I felt a strange sense of accomplishment. I wasn't looking for confirmation from others. What I had experienced was real to me, and that was enough. But the more I shared it, the more I realized that it wasn't just about me. My story wasn't just for my own healing, it was for others as well. It was about showing them that the fear of death didn't have to rule their lives. It was about opening their eyes to the possibility that something greater awaited us all. As the days passed, I continued to speak with others. Some, like Peter, were skeptical, but open. Others, like Linda, who had lost her husband, embraced the message with tears in their eyes. And still others, who had suffered their own losses or had been facing fears about death, found comfort in the idea that there was more to this world than they could understand. I began to see a pattern in the conversations I had. People who had been hardened by loss, people who had struggled with fear and uncertainty, seemed to resonate with my words the most. They didn't need proof or scientific validation, they just needed to hear that there was hope, that there was something beyond the suffering they had experienced. I started to realize that my experience wasn't just about proving something to others. It was about offering a different perspective, a perspective rooted in love, light, and peace. And if that message could bring comfort to even one person, then it was worth everything. By the time I had shared my story with a handful of people, I could feel the ripple effect taking hold. My words were spreading, not just within my circle, but beyond. Slowly, people were starting to talk about what I had experienced, to open up about their own fears, their own questions, their own stories. The more I spoke, the more I saw the walls of doubt and fear crumbling, one conversation at a time. I wasn't just sharing a near-death experience anymore, I was sharing a message of hope. And that was the greatest gift I could offer to the world. In the weeks following my deeper dive into sharing my near-death experience, I found myself facing a new challenge, the internal struggle that seemed to emerge out of nowhere. Despite all the peace and comfort I had gained from the experience, there were moments when doubt would creep in, undermining the serenity I had fought so hard to embrace. The pull between the world I had known and the new spiritual understanding I had found seemed to grow stronger each day. I was living in two worlds, one rooted in the mundane, the material, the everyday life I had known for so many years, and the other, a world that felt almost too bright, too different, too beyond. The hardest part was reconciling these two worlds within myself. I couldn't simply pretend that everything was the same as before. My experience had changed me fundamentally, and I was struggling with how to navigate the reactions of others. There were still those who didn't believe me, people who dismissed my words as a form of delusion or just the aftermath of a traumatic experience. It was one thing to share my truth with open-minded people, but it was another to confront those who questioned the validity of what I had gone through. And yet, despite the pushback, I knew deep in my heart that I couldn't stop sharing. I remember one night, sitting alone in my living room, when the weight of it all hit me. Eleanor had gone to bed early, and I was left alone with my thoughts, my doubts, my fears. The house was quiet, too quiet, almost as if it too was holding its breath, waiting for me to make sense of what had happened. I leaned back on the couch, staring up at the ceiling. I could still see the light, the pure, radiant light that enveloped me when I crossed over, the overwhelming sense of love that filled me to the core. I could still feel the weightlessness, the peace, the absence of fear. But I was far from that place now, surrounded by the physical world again, full of its noise and chaos. Was it real? I asked aloud, my voice barely a whisper in the silence. I had asked myself this question many times, but tonight, it felt different. I wasn't just questioning the reality of the experience, but whether it was possible for a person like me, someone with a long history of being grounded in the scientific and rational, to fully integrate something so mystical into the fabric of my life. I closed my eyes, but the vision of the light persisted, as if it was right there, just beyond my reach. The warmth. The peace. The understanding that I wasn't alone. It was still so vivid, so real. It wasn't a hallucination. I knew that. But how could I explain it? How could I convince people that what I had seen wasn't some kind of brain chemical reaction, that it was something more? The doubt gnawed at me like a constant itch, and no matter how many times I reassured myself, it wouldn't go away. It wasn't just the skeptics who troubled me, it was the nagging feeling that I wasn't equipped to carry such a powerful message. Who was I to be the one to share this truth? Was I really the right person to speak about something as profound as life after death? I stood up from the couch, pacing around the room, trying to shake off the dark cloud of doubt that was hovering over me. I needed to find something that could give me the confidence I was desperately seeking. I thought about Mark, and the way he had helped me during our last conversation. He didn't just listen, he guided me through my fear of sharing my experience. Maybe I needed to talk to him again, ask him for advice on how to stay strong in the face of all this uncertainty. Just as I was about to reach for the phone, I heard the sound of footsteps behind me. It was Eleanor, standing in the doorway, her silhouette framed by the dim light of the hallway. "John," she said softly, her voice filled with concern. "Are you all right? You've been up for hours. You haven't been this restless since you came home from the hospital." I turned toward her, forcing a smile. "I'm fine, Elle. Just thinking." She walked over to me, her steps slow and deliberate. "You don't look fine. You look like you're carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders. What's going on?" I hesitated. I wanted to share everything, the doubts, the confusion, the internal battle I was facing. But how could I? She hadn't experienced what I had. She wasn't in the same place I was. How could I expect her to understand? "I'm just struggling," I admitted, my voice quieter than I intended. I thought that once I started talking about it, everything would fall into place. But now, it feels like I'm just getting more lost. I don't know how to keep going, Elle. I don't know if I'm strong enough to keep sharing it. Eleanor reached out, placing a hand on my arm. "John, you're doing something so important. You're sharing something that could change lives. But I can see that it's weighing on you. Maybe it's time to give yourself a break. You don't have to be perfect at this. You don't have to have all the answers. I nodded slowly, but the weight of her words didn't fully register. What did she mean, give yourself a break? I couldn't stop. Not when I had been given this message, this gift, this chance to share something that could bring peace to others. I can't stop, Elle. I know it's hard, but I feel like if I don't keep going, then I'll be letting everyone down. I'll be letting myself down. She gave me a small, understanding smile. You won't let anyone down, John. You're just human. And maybe that's the point of it all, maybe you don't have to have everything figured out. Maybe you're not supposed to be perfect. Just, keep sharing, but also take care of yourself. Don't forget about the person you were before all this happened. You're still him, too. Her words were a balm for my restless soul, but the truth was, I didn't know how to take a step back. This wasn't just something I could walk away from. The message I had received felt too important. It felt too real. But maybe Eleanor was right. Maybe I needed to learn how to balance the two worlds, the one that demanded I keep going and the one that needed me to take care of myself. Maybe there was a way to do both. I sat back down on the couch, feeling the weight of the conversation linger in the air. For the first time in a long while, I allowed myself to breathe deeply. Maybe this was my struggle, learning not just how to share the message, but how to live with it, how to live with the truth of what I had seen and experienced. Maybe it wasn't just about giving answers to others, but finding peace with the questions myself. And in that moment, as I let the silence surround me, I realized that finding peace within myself was just as important as sharing the message. Perhaps, in time, the balance would come. But for now, I had to hold on to the truth that I had seen and trust that it would guide me. There was a light in the distance. And I would follow it, wherever it took me. As the days continued to unfold, a certain calm began to settle over me, though not in the way I expected. It wasn't the all-consuming peace I had felt during my near-death experience, but something subtler, something more patient. I started to realize that this journey I was on was not a race. There was no deadline for me to meet, no pressure to get everything perfect. I had to trust in the process, in the timing of it all, and in the gentle unfolding of my own understanding. The ripple effects of my story had already started to reach people in ways I hadn't anticipated, and the message was taking on a life of its own. The weight of the world wasn't mine to carry alone, I reminded myself, and for the first time, I allowed myself to feel the quiet pull of gratitude for everything that had brought me to this point. The surgery, the near-death experience, the lessons I had learned, it all felt like it had led me here, to a deeper understanding of my purpose. That afternoon, as I sat on the back porch, watching the sun slowly sink beneath the horizon, I reflected on the conversations I had had over the past few weeks. I thought about my conversations with people like Peter, my colleague, and Linda, the widow who had been struggling with her grief. There was one conversation in particular that stood out, one that left a lasting impression on me. It had been with Marie, a woman in her early 70s who had lost her son to a car accident several years ago. Marie and I had become close friends over the past few months, ever since I had moved into the neighborhood. We would meet for coffee once a week and chat about everything from family to the weather. But one afternoon, as we sat in her cozy kitchen sipping tea, she shared something with me that I hadn't expected. "I've been following your story, John," she said softly, her eyes filled with both curiosity and a hint of caution. "What you've been through. I can't even begin to imagine." I looked at her, sensing that this conversation was different from all the others. There was something raw in her voice, something unspoken that I knew was coming. "I know," I replied gently. "It's not easy to talk about. But I believe that there's something important in it. And I've had some incredible responses from people who found comfort in hearing my story." Marie nodded, but there was a sadness in her eyes that I couldn't quite place. She took a deep breath, as if weighing whether or not to continue. Then she spoke again, her voice trembling ever so slightly. John, I've been struggling with something for years. When my son passed away, I didn't know how to keep going. I've read books, gone to support groups, but nothing ever really brought me peace. I kept asking myself if I would ever see him again. If there was a chance I could be with him once more. I've wondered if there's life after death. I've wondered if he's still out there somewhere. Her words struck a chord deep within me, and I knew that this moment was one of those rare instances when two souls connected in a way that transcended words. She wasn't just seeking answers, she was searching for a way to heal, to understand the loss she had endured. It was a familiar feeling, something I had felt myself after my near-death experience. I don't have all the answers, Marie, I said, my voice thick with emotion. But I know one thing for certain, our loved ones, the ones who've passed, they're still with us. They're not gone in the way we think. They exist in a different form, a form we may not fully understand, but they're there. I felt it when I crossed over. I felt the presence of those who came before me, and it wasn't a goodbye. It was just another chapter. A continuation. Tears welled in Marie's eyes, and she wiped them away quickly, but I could see the relief in her face. It wasn't that she believed everything I had said right then and there, but there was something about hearing it from someone else, someone who had experienced it firsthand, that gave her a sense of peace. Maybe that's what I needed to hear all along, she whispered, her voice barely audible. That there's more to this life. That it's not the end when we lose someone. Maybe it's just a new beginning. I smiled at her, my heart swelling with a deep sense of fulfillment. I believe that's true, Marie. And I believe you'll see him again. Maybe not in the way you expect, but he's not far. He's always with you. After that conversation, I couldn't help but reflect on how often the fear of death, the unknown, kept people from living fully. We all have our own doubts and questions about what comes after we leave this world, but what if the answers were simpler than we thought? What if the answer wasn't about trying to figure out the exact details of the afterlife, but about understanding the love that transcends everything? Later that evening, I sat down at the kitchen table, trying to organize my thoughts. I wasn't just sharing my experience with others anymore, I was becoming a messenger, a conduit for something greater. And I wasn't sure if I was ready for the weight of that responsibility. But in those quiet moments, when I reflected on the lives I had touched, the peace I had shared, I knew that I couldn't stop now. My message wasn't about preaching a specific belief or convincing anyone to adopt my perspective, it was about offering comfort, offering the idea that death didn't have to be feared. That there was something beyond, something filled with light and love, waiting for all of us when our time here was over. I took a deep breath, feeling a sense of calm wash over me. The weight I had been carrying didn't feel so heavy anymore. I wasn't alone in this. I had a purpose, a message to share, and no matter how difficult or uncertain the path ahead might be, I would follow it with an open heart. As I stood up from the table, I glanced at the clock. It was almost midnight. The house was quiet again, the world outside still. And in the stillness, I felt something else, a knowing, a peace that had settled in me. Whatever lay ahead, whatever struggles or doubts I would face, I was no longer afraid. I had seen beyond the veil, and that knowledge gave me strength. I was no longer just living in the world I had known before. I had crossed over, and now, I was here to share what I had found. There was more to this life. And I was ready to show others. As the days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months, I found that my journey wasn't just about the message I had brought back, it was about living the message every single day. The lessons I had learned during my near-death experience were not just about passing on a story, they were about embodying the truth I had seen, feeling the peace I had experienced, and living a life that reflected the love and light I had touched. The more I shared my story, the more I realized that I wasn't the same person I had been before my heart stopped. I had come back, yes, but I had returned not only with a new understanding of death but with a new understanding of life itself. I wasn't simply going through the motions anymore. I was more present. More engaged. More attuned to the world around me. And more importantly, I was listening to the whispers of truth that now filled my heart with an unshakable peace. Eleanor noticed the change in me, of course. She always did. She was the love of my life, the one person who had stood by me through everything. But even she saw a difference in how I was living. I was no longer burdened by the fear of what was to come. I had become, in a sense, more free. More alive. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sun dip below the horizon, she turned to me, her eyes filled with a mixture of admiration and curiosity. "You know, John," she began, "you've changed so much since your surgery. I see it in the way you talk, the way you move, the way you interact with the world. You're not the same person you were before." I smiled at her, feeling the warmth of her words seep into my heart. "I guess that's true. I'm not the same. But I think that's a good thing, don't you?" She nodded, her hand resting gently in mine. "It is. But I've been wondering something. You've shared so much with everyone, your friends, your family, people you barely know, but what about you? What about you and what you've learned? You've been so focused on helping others, but what's this journey been like for you, John?" Her question struck me like a lightning bolt, a sudden realization that I had been so focused on sharing my message that I hadn't fully explored what this journey meant for me personally. What had I learned? What had I truly taken from all of this? Was there more for me to discover, even now? I guess I've been so focused on helping others that I've forgotten to stop and reflect on my own transformation, I admitted, my voice soft. But I think I'm starting to understand that this experience isn't just about what I share with others, it's about living in the truth of what I've seen and felt. It's about embracing the peace that's always been there, the love that's always been there. And it's about trusting that we're all part of something bigger, something beautiful, something eternal. Eleanor squeezed my hand. "I think that's what you've been trying to tell me all along, but I'm only starting to understand. You've always been so practical, so grounded. But now you're speaking a different language. One of faith, one of love, and one of deep knowing." I nodded slowly. "It's hard to put into words, Elle. It's more of a feeling, a knowing that life is so much more than we see. That love, and the connections we make, transcend everything else. It's like, we're all part of a vast, interconnected web, and when we allow ourselves to open up to that truth, everything becomes clearer." Her eyes softened as she leaned in to kiss my forehead. "You found peace, haven't you?" I nodded again, feeling the tears well up in my eyes. For the first time in a long while, I felt the full weight of everything I had been through. But instead of feeling burdened, I felt a sense of liberation. I have. And I think that's the final message I was meant to bring back. It's not about living in fear of death. It's about living in love, in connection, in the knowledge that there's something greater than all of us. That love is eternal, and so are we. In that moment, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the world in golden light, I felt a deep sense of peace wash over me. Everything I had feared, all the uncertainty, had melted away. I had seen the other side. I had crossed over. And I had come back to share the message that there was no need to fear death. I wasn't the only one who could have this peace. It was there for everyone. It was there for all of us, if we could just open ourselves up to it. Over the next few months, I continued to share my story with more people, some friends, some strangers, some in quiet conversations, others in more formal settings. Each time I spoke, I felt the ripples of my message spread further and further, touching lives in ways I couldn't have imagined. Some people still struggled with the idea, of course. Skeptics would always be there, but I no longer felt the need to convince anyone. My purpose was simply to share what I had seen, to speak my truth and let others make of it what they would. But there was one thing I knew for sure, I had a peace within me that could not be shaken. I had seen beyond the veil, and I understood that death was not an end but a transition. The love we share, the connections we make, continue on. The last chapter of my life had begun, but it wasn't about the end, it was about the ongoing journey. I had come back with a message, but that message wasn't just for others. It was for me, too. It was a reminder that life, in all its beauty and pain, was fleeting, but love, light, and connection were eternal. And as I looked out at the world, I knew that no matter what happened next, I would face it with the same peace, the same love, and the same trust that I had found on the other side. Because I had seen the light, and it had shown me everything I needed to know. I've died, I whispered to myself one final time, and I'm not afraid anymore. The light that had once greeted me, the warmth that had enveloped me, was now part of me, and I carried it with me wherever I went. The journey wasn't over, it had only just begun. And this time, I would walk it with my heart open, knowing that there was nothing to fear. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?